Hey everyone, welcome back to Installation 00. It's been a long time in coming, but I'm immensely pleased to say that the Most Detailed Breakdown series is back in a big way. We've had a couple of Most Detailed Breakdowns last year from different franchises, but the last time we actually had a proper Halo Most Detailed was nearly 2 years ago, when we crossed the 200,000 subscriber mark. A lot has happened since then, hence why the series was semi-shelved while I worked through some stuff. As you all well know, most detailed breakdowns take a long time to research, write and flesh out in order to get to the level of detail and fidelity that is befitting of the name Most Detailed Breakdown. Well, I've been working tirelessly since the new year writing scripts and keeping up with the weekly upload schedule that I am now immensely happy to say that we have general lore and theory content planned out until nearly July and 12 Most Detailed Breakdowns over the rest of the year. There's also some current series coming to their natural conclusion, and the revival of a couple of older series, so a lot of things are still changing. So remember, if you want to see all of that awesome stuff I have planned in, make sure you hit the subscribe button and the little bell icon so you're notified the second a video releases. So today, we will take a detailed look at the orbital defense platforms, analysing everything about them in intense detail, and on that point I must say the orbital defense platforms are one of the most fleshed out concepts in the Halo universe, leaving very little to the imagination or assumptions based on the science fiction nature of the item in question. Whomever was responsible for the design of the Cairo and its graphical update for Halo 2 Anniversary evidently spent an immense amount of time designing to make the station flow and feel like a real location that would actually be occupied and worked within rather than just a level of a game. So credit to them. ODPs are actually alarmingly more science fact than they are science fiction. So I've endeavoured to make sure as much information here is as factually accurate and lore accurate as possible, calling upon dozens of different reference points in the books, games and reference material for the Halo universe, while also supplementing peripherally with known principles of science, technology, engineering and mathematics, informed by my own qualifications and experience in these fields to give you the highest fidelity information available. In addition, in order to forever increase the fidelity and quality of my work, I've taken it upon myself to mark each part of the video based on whether it is lore or canon and thus finds its roots in either the games, books or extended media from the Halo universe, seated in the science, technology, engineering and mathematics fields, in which case they are known principles of science, technology, engineering and maths, or speculative, being based on well-reasoned and conservative jumps of logic, usually along the lines of what we would expect for certain circumstances. Anytime that the source material changes between these three phases, I will mark them at the top right of the video. And furthermore, all references and source material are linked in the description. I will also quickly add here that in order to flesh out the orbital defense platform as comprehensively as I have, I spent about 3 weeks completely modelling the entirety of the orbital defense platform's habitation ring, along with the hull of the orbital defense platform and the main gun to ensure that it actually fits within it, with additional corridors and connections between areas being made based on the implied connections implied by the rooms within the levels itself, along with the entire station being mirrored along its central axis to fully flesh out the habitation ring. This was heavily informed by both the in-game layout of both levels, the Armory and the Cairo station from Halo 2 and Halo 2 Anniversary, as well as heavy use of the cutaway artwork of the Cairo station featured in Halo Warfleet, both of which I'll be calling upon during the entirety of this video, as well as the fully fleshed out model that I created to add additional context and substance to this video, the 3D model of which will be made available via my Patreon, and I'm sure there's some skilled members of you out there who'd be able to convert it into a playable space. That's all I have to say for now, aside from thanks for sticking with me, and I'm very pleased to welcome back the reason many of you found me in the first place, the Most Detailed Breakdown series, and today we're looking at the orbital defense platforms. Let's move. Orbital Defense Platforms, or ODPs, are among the most advanced human-engineered space defense systems in the Halo universe. These stations incorporate cutting-edge technologies in weaponry, power generation, armor targeting, and logistics to maintain planetary security. Originally designed by lead engineer Alexander Kerr Fox and Dr. Stephen Loftus, and manufactured at Vosper Engineering on Luna, the ODPs represent a quantum leap in colonial defense, with an ability to exact colossal damage to ingressing attacks via one of the most powerful weapons platforms humanity has ever created. The ODPs measure an impressive 536 meters or 1,760 feet in length, a width of 786 meters or 2,580 feet, and a height of 1,336 meters or 4,380 feet, and a complete dry mass of 2.9 million metric tons. The sheer size of the platforms mean they are manufactured in modular components on Luna before being assembled in geostationary orbit at their intended coordinates. Naming of the ODPs generally follows suit with the city above which the station approximately orbits, although it's not unusual for the city's respectively named station to actually be holding position above a location on the planet's surface hundreds or even thousands of kilometers away from the city itself. It is equally common for stations within battle clusters to be named after cities that are geographically located quite close to one another, just as the battle clusters themselves do in geostationary orbit. An example of this is with the Cairo, Athens and Malta. The three cities are geographically close to each other, even if the positions of the Athens and the Malta stations are startlingly further away from their named cities than the Cairo. They are named as such due to their physical proximity to each other as a battle cluster. Orbital defense platforms are operated and maintained by the Orbital Defense Command, a component of the UNSC Air Force, however operate under Joint Task Force operations parameters, and thus can be employed by the UNSC Navy as part of the Naval Command during battle scenarios, and are the first and often last line of defense for a colony. These immense orbital installations, built entirely around the most powerful guns ever constructed by humanity, are a threat to any unwelcome visitors to a colony, with enough firepower to entirely gut a capital ship from stem to stern in a single shot. The superstructure of the ODPs are built around the main gun and its supporting infrastructure. The supermech itself provides much of the key superstructural support through a heavy box section with triangular spars. This superstructure encases the supermech and all of its major components. This central component of the station houses the barrel and accelerator coils of the main gun, the stacked liquid metal capacitance cells, the central fusion reactor power plant, plus essential cooling systems and power distribution systems. The entire main gun assembly is mounted on a reciprocating inertial dampening mechanism, separating the main gun from the habitation ring so that during operation, the habitable sections of the station aren't constantly recoiling from firing. These immense mechanisms are the only two direct physical connections between the main gun's boom and the habitation ring, so are rightly extraordinarily heavy-duty and over-engineered to withstand the immense forces at play. This enables the habitation ring to be majoritively saved from sudden vertical jerking motions caused by immense recoil, but even then, the habitation ring will experience some degree of vibration and thus discomfort from the firing of the main gun. The habitation ring's superstructure is a separate system of interconnected beams and structural reinforcements that straddles the inertial dampening mechanism as a soft-mounted connection between the two respective superstructures, and allows movement over a stroke distance of 20 meters. At the instant of firing a round, the station simultaneously fires two powerful station-keeping thrusters. The thrust produced cancels out the recoil from firing the main gun, allowing the station to maintain its stable orbit without ever being thrown into a degrading orbit by the very recoil of its main armament. The entire station itself can be adjusted using positional thrusters to enable the station to aim at specific targets. It is even possible to roll the station over 180 degrees to target locations on the planet's surface it is in geostationary orbit above. The entire hull of the ODP is clad in Durasteel, a composite armour cladding used for fire protection, blast protection, and impact resistance. It is a cheaper alternative to the most costly titanium A battleplate armour seen on most UNSC warships, but still provides relatively decent protection against micrometeorites, space debris, high-velocity impacts and projectile weapons, but has limited resistance to energy-based weapons. Generally speaking, if a ship is close enough to fire its weapon at the ODP, it's more than close enough to receive a critical hit from the station's main gun, so it was decided the need for excessive armor plating was negligible. Particularly when ODPs operate in battle clusters, the sheer firepower brought to bear more or less negates the risks of ships getting close enough to score crippling hits to the stations. The only major weak point is through direct boarding action, as the MAC isn't meant to target craft so small and numerous. Beneath the Durasteel cladding is a layer of encapsulated healing agent to reduce sprawl from impact and automatically seal small hull breaches. This is all contained within a cellular hexagonal material that simply can be laid and attached to connection hardpoints on the superstructure, within the inner hull surface between the outer hull and the inner sealed bulkheads of the station's habitable areas. The ODP is manned and operated by a crew of 152 Air Force and Navy personnel who perform all of the tasks expected to keep the station fully operational, including everything from command to freight and logistics, communications and even cleaning. The station also carries a complement of 136 UNSC Marines who act as onboard security details, armed and capable of performing security duties throughout the station, as well as repel boarders should the station come under attack through boarding action. The ODP also carries 16 SKT-9s, a variant of the UNSC lifeboat commonly known as the Bumblebee solely for evacuation purposes. Beyond this, the ODP carries various aircraft docked in its hangar bays and battle cluster specialization modules, including 10 Pelican dropships or 10 broadsword AX strike craft, or a mix of these in its 10 respective bays. Pelican dropships are an extremely versatile space-to-ground capable craft used by the United Nations Space Command in its role as a tactical aerospace lifter. The Pelican is mainly used for the pickup and transportation of personnel, vehicles and equipment, though some variants are capable of serving in the role of a gunship. The broadsword AX strike craft is a versatile and well-armed atmospheric-exo-atmospheric strike fighter typically used to engage equal or superior enemy craft in low to zero gravity conditions. As its kind has few equals within humanity's known arsenal, the broadsword was designed to address the incredible speed and firepower displayed by a variety of Covenant fighters. It is most prominently used by the UNSC Air Force in suborbital dogfights. The ODPs can also play host to an assumed maximum of 2 GA-TL-1 longswords or up to 4 D-82 darters in the station's respective battle cluster specialization modules. The GA-TL-1 longswords are the mainstay multi-mission platform in service with the UNSC Air Force and UNSC Navy, being capable of atmospheric and exo-atmospheric operation and can be fitted for a myriad of roles simultaneously. Among those roles, longswords most often operate as fleet defense fighters, orbital defense and deep space interceptors, or as strike fighters, among other more specialized tasks. And the D-82 darters are medium-lift utility dropships, filling a niche between the smaller Pelican series and the larger Albatross and Heron dropships, and are not intended for combat, instead functioning to deliver supplies such as rations and munitions to the station and the other stations in its battle cluster. The most dominating aspect of the Moncton-class is the main gun, true of most ODPs. The massive core superstructure of the station makes up the entirety of the platform's immense 1.3 kilometer height, traversing the plane of the Habitation Ring. Moncton-class platforms are equipped with a 14D4A1 magnetic accelerator cannon, a power-hungry 802 meter or 2,632 foot long coil gun that fires a ferric tungsten slug travelling at several kilometers per second, which carries enough energy to punch clean through a Covenant capital ship. There are some specific mathematical calculations that can be made based on these projectiles to aid in fully understanding the power of the Supermax, but some modest and conservative estimates may be employed. The real driving force behind the Supermax is the Accelerator Coils. The shell being fired is accelerated by hundreds of asynchronous linear induction motors, which all line the barrel of the weapon. Due to the mass and velocities at play, everything about this is massive. The barrel measures over 800 meters in length with a bore of 152.4 centimeters or 60 inches and an overall diameter of 914.4 centimeters or 360 inches, meaning the walls of the barrel, and thus the accelerator coils, are a multi-layered coil wall measuring 381 centimeters or 150 inches in thickness. The coil walls are composed of various layers within each of the hundreds of stacked asynchronous linear induction motor modules, 10 feet in height apiece. The innermost surface is a smooth walled bore. Directly behind this is a high-gore stacked inner core with precisely engineered eddy current cavities designed to reshape and reintegrate eddy currents back into the circuit to reduce electromagnetic field losses. Surrounding this are phased superconductor coils, immense coils of superconductors woven tightly around the inner high-Gauss core. This is encased in a metal cladding which is wrapped in heavy electromagnetic shielding, a Faraday cage, and a coolant system designed to circulate a liquid coolant around the coils for heat management. Finally, the outermost layer of the barrel is lined with heavy core recapturing coil stacks that harvest excess electromagnetic flux and reroute it back to the system, with the final hull plate cladding enclosing the entire assembly. These incredibly large coils and superconductors enable the Supermac to accelerate its projectile from entirely stationary to several thousand meters per second over the distance of only 800 meters, meaning the projectile itself actually experiences over 1,000 g-forces of acceleration down the length of the barrel. Without electromagnetic shielding layers, the firing of the Supermac would draw anything metal or magnetic towards it at incredible speed. Small objects like bolts, metallic meteorites and space debris would strike the barrel and cause damage over time, and the constant cycling electromagnetic field would induce metal fatigue in the surrounding superstructure of the station, weakening the structure over time and potentially leading to catastrophic structural failure. Fire control is where the rounds are loaded into the Supermac's barrel. Here, a massive automated mechanism retrieves a Mac round being fed to it from Mac storage, dropping it into the autoloader. This mechanism then moves the round to the breech of the accelerator, cycling it through an airlock and loads the round. A little over a second later, the accelerators activate and propel the round through their powerful electromagnetic fields, ejecting the round from the muzzle at hypervelocities. Fire control can only be accessed via an access airlock and elevator at the foot of the main boom, or via Hangar Bays C1, accessible via another elevator on the other side of the room. This room doesn't need to be occupied for the station to be able to function or for the Mac to fire, as the system is almost entirely automated or controlled from the bridge of the station. However, there are numerous diagnostic and control terminals available in fire control for the sakes of maintenance, servicing, repairs, and optimizations. It is assumed one of Hangar Bays C1's primary purposes is the delivery of maintenance personnel via Pelican, or delivery of components for replacement or repair. The round fired by the Moncton-Class Orbital Weapons Platform is quoted exactly as a multi-ton ferrotungsten slug measuring 30 feet or 9.14 meters in length and 4.98 feet or 1.52 meters in diameter, which is fired at several kilometers per second. Little more information is given beyond this, however that's all of the essential information we require to really dial in the figures. Ferrotungsten is a ferroalloy consisting of iron and tungsten with the atomic moniker FeW. Iron is an obvious choice when considering materials to make a projectile for a coil gun that functions on the basis of electromagnetism, but the importance of tungsten in this consideration cannot be understated. Tungsten is a refractory metal with a unique set of properties including the highest melting point among all elements, high elastic modulus, high density, high thermal conductivity, and excellent mechanical properties at elevated temperatures. The process of electromagnetic induction generates incredible heat within the material due to the oscillating electromagnetic fields. Thus, the properties of tungsten in its thermal conductivity, mechanical properties at temperature, and high melting point are of immense benefit. Tungsten is also distinguished by its excellent stability and suitable density and significantly enhances the hardness and electrical conductivity of alloys due to its high density. It may be due to this inductance heating and the high heat tolerances of tungsten that fired MAC rounds appear to the eye like energy beams as opposed to projectiles. The intense heat has likely rendered the paint, cladding and outer layers of the round molten, and due to the immense velocity, this incandescence appears to the eye like an impossibly long streak, more like an energy weapon than a projectile. A similar phenomena can be observed with tracer rounds in conventional rifles. Although only the very rear of the projectile is actually producing the tracer effect, and the bullet is very small, it still appears as a long streak. Scale this up in size and velocity, and you can see how the MAC can occasionally appear to be firing a beam, and not a single round. Ferrotungsten has an overall density of 15.5 grams per cubic centimetre, and for this specific application tend to be in mixes of 20% iron and 80% tungsten, with the aforementioned dimensions being 30 feet in length and about 5 feet in diameter. We can ascertain that the mass of the projectiles fired by the Moncton class is 251 metric tons. This isn't even subject to debate. Based on the exact dimensions and the density of the material used, it only weighs 251 metric tons, which is still a hefty projectile, but orders of magnitude less than other Supermac rounds we've previously discussed on this channel. The round is quoted at being fired at several kilometers per second. If a couple is 2, and a few is 3, and a dozen is 12, we can assume several fall somewhere between 4 and 11. If we underestimate this and only assume the round is fired at 5 kilometers per second, although it can likely fire at different speeds based on the charge of the gun, this means the round will be fired with the kinetic energy of 3,137.5 gigajoules, or 749.8 tons of TNT. Or, to put this into comparison with something more immediately familiar, over 2.3 trillion foot-pounds, which equate to over 154 million 50 caliber anti-material rifle rounds. Picture nearly 500,000 main battle tanks firing their 120mm cannons simultaneously. The Supermac achieves this with one single round. Or, as a direct comparison to truly colossal naval artillery, the 16-inch 50 caliber Mark 7 gun fired a 1,200 kilogram armor-piercing shell at 760 meters per second for a kinetic energy of 255.6 million foot-pounds. The Supermac would be like getting hit with 9,053 of these rounds at the same time. The United States Iowa-class battleships have these guns on board. 9 of them per ship, in fact, meaning all 4 of the Iowa-class battleships that were completed, the USS Iowa, New Jersey, Missouri and Wisconsin, would have to continually fire their collected 36 main guns constantly for 2 hours, 5 minutes and 44 seconds to match the energy of a single Supermac round from the Moncton-Class Orbital Defense Platform. Since the reactor on board produces such immense levels of energy, this must be transformed and rectified through monolithic power transformer stations that take the staggering electrical energy output from the reactor and convert it to an electrical state more befitting of its applications. The reactor's electrical output is inherently direct current electricity, on the order of 17.8 megawatts per cycle, or the equivalent of 2.13 gigawatt hours released just to fire one round. This direct current is great for use with digital electronics if stepped down to tolerable voltages for sensitive equipment, but it is ill-suited to the task of firing a Supermac, which is ultimately the station's primary purpose. In order to accelerate the projectile to the velocities required, the accelerator coils require high voltage and high current over a very brief duration of time. So the immense direct current electricity from the reactor must be converted to AC or alternating current for use with the asynchronous linear induction motors of the weapon platform. This takes place in immense inverters that are housed within the larger section of the boom arm above the plane of the Habitation Ring. These not only convert DC to AC, but also send it through massive step-up transformer circuits on par with major power stations, so the electricity available is ideally suited to the task at hand, before being offloaded to the station's immense stacked liquid metal capacitance cells that adjust the constant flow of energy from the reactor to the pulse power necessary for the weapon's accelerator coils to function. Along both sides of the main boom are a total of 10 ports that open and close during the firing cycle. Although there is no specific information on the purpose of these ports, it stands to reason that they are aiding in cooling the accelerator coils, transformer circuits, and perhaps even the reactor as well. It doesn't make sense for these to be thrusters to counteract the ODP's equivalent of muzzle rise, as the ejector is in the same direction as the expected muzzle rise, which would only add to this effect. These ports being utilised for cooling makes sense, as in space, there is no atmosphere for heat to dissipate to through convection or conduction. The vacuum of space means heat can only really be dissipated through radiation, which, while it accounts for 60% of heat loss from an object, it happens gradually over extended periods of time. Conduction heat transfer involves the direct transfer of heat from one surface to another. The coolant system itself is an example of this, conducting the heat from the coils of the ODP through surface interfaces into the pipes carrying the coolant. In the absence of coolant, the heat would be conducted through all attached surfaces, heating the entire superstructure of the ODP faster than radiative heat could dissipate it, eventually cooking the occupants and destroying the station. Convection is when heat is transferred through the movement of a gas or liquid around a surface, and is impossible in the vacuum of space. This leaves a final option similar to evaporation. The coolant carrying the heat would conduct this heat to a chemical coolant ejector, warming the chemical temperature control substance and cooling the coolant back down. This now heat-carrying chemical agent could then be ejected from the ports, carrying with it the heat from the station, and the second this water encounters the vacuum of space, it would instantly boil due to lack of pressure, and evaporate to a gas, dissipating the heat into the vacuum of space more rapidly than radiation could. This would mean that the liquid ejector would need periodic replenishment from supply runs, but would be worth the trade-off in the sheer efficiency of heat management. The sheer power of the Supermax coils means that the coils can be misaligned or drift out of phase from the kinetic and mechanical forces created by the presence of their own high-powered electromagnetic fields. This misalignment or phase drift can adversely affect the efficiency of the coils and their ability to accelerate projectiles, as well as introducing irregularities in the accelerating EM fields, which could lead to eddy currents and the generation of hotspots through the coils. In order to negate this, after a single shot, the large inductor carriage or discharge and realignment stack climbs the main boom and rapidly descends again, discharging any remaining electromagnetism and routing it back into the capacitive cells, while simultaneously realigning the coils and ensuring they remain in phase. The mechanism by which this climbs and descends the boom is through the very electromagnetic forces that charge the coils, using the inductance loops to generate a force on the inductor carriage, meaning very little additional mechanical energy is required to operate this mechanism. The final major component of the main gun is the Cantilever Boom, a heavy-duty structural element that braces the main boom at its furthest point from its connection to the main station and bracing against the superstructure of the core of the station, acting as a cross brace to keep the structure rigid and unlikely to torque, twist, or otherwise go through structural stress, particularly when the entire platform is undergoing a reorientation. This cantilever also carries many of the high-order cables that complete the circuit of the coils. If the reactor contained within the core of the station is the power source, and the coils run the length of the barrel in the main boom, the cantilever boom is the main conduit for these circuits to return to the power source, completing the circuit. It also wouldn't be surprising if this boom also carries a long array of radiators that aid in cooling either the coils of the gun or more likely the reactor itself. Fusion reactors generate extreme heat which must be removed in order for them to remain active without overheating. Radiators made of materials with high infrared emissivity are designed to absorb heat and then efficiently radiate it away as infrared light into the cold empty space. Radiators can be passive or active. Passive radiators rely on heat conducting to the surface and then radiating to space. Active radiators use fluids like ammonia that carry heat to the radiator and then radiate it to space. Since the cantilever boom is directly above the location of the reactor, and the boom itself is an open frame cross-brace assembly, it would allow the infrared light to be emitted to space. The ODPs use high-energy fusion cores, nuclear fusion reactors that operate on the principle of thermonuclear fusion, where atomic nuclei fuse under extreme heat and pressure to release energy. But as high-energy fusion cores, these reactors are redundantly shielded and can operate under extreme conditions, allowing them to operate at higher temperatures and energy output levels to sustain the Supermach's incredible energy requirements. Containment is achieved through magnetic confinement, or tokamak-like fields, or inertial confinement, otherwise known as plasma compression. The deuterium-tritium fusion reaction is the most efficient and commonly used approach for generating energy in modern nuclear fusion reactors. This process involves the fusion of deuterium and tritium nuclei to form helium-4 and a high-energy neutron, releasing a substantial amount of energy. With conventional fusion reactors, the reaction releases high-energy neutrons which transfer heat to heat exchangers, and power turbines which then convert the kinetic energy of the rotating turbines into usable energy. The high-energy fusion cores instead use electrostatic direct energy conversion, being an advanced energy extraction method that converts high-energy charged particles into usable electrical power without relying on traditional thermal cycles, e.g. steam turbines or heat exchangers. This technology is particularly relevant for fusion reactors where charged particles like protons, alpha particles, and helium nuclei and other ions are produced. In a fusion reactor, energetic ions are ejected at high velocities. These particles carry a significant amount of kinetic energy. The charged particles are ordered into a linear beam and sent into the converter itself. Here, positively and negatively charged particles are separated. Following this, separated ions are grouped by their energy and gathered as they touch collector grids of varying potentials. Electrostatic fields slow and capture these particles via a series of graded electrostatic grids or dynamic electrostatic fields that decelerate the charged particles. As they slow down, their kinetic energy is directly converted into electrical energy, similar to how a capacitor accumulates a charge. These grids thereby make up the positive side of the circuit, while the electrons make up the negative side. The efficiency of this process is much higher than conventional heat exchanger options, reaching as high as 90%, and that is based solely on our current technology. It is reasonable, given the further 500 years of advancement, that even more efficient variations would be found. The captured energy is then fed into an electrical circuit. This allows for a direct current or DC electrical output, bypassing conventional heat to electricity inefficiencies. It also benefits from a more compact design, eliminating the bulky turbines and coolant systems, and with such systems there is significantly reduced heat waste, meaning the coolant systems can be startlingly less complex, with another massive benefit being that it's ideal for space applications as it works well in zero-gravity environments with minimal infrastructure. It's also worth noting that in order for the station's fusion reactors to generate enough energy to fire a round, they'd need to produce over 3,500 gigajoules of energy for that round, plus the same again to provide enough headroom for max power output tolerances, plus 10% for the operation of the rest of the station, meaning the reactors would need to produce 7,700 gigajoules of energy every 15 seconds. This would consume less than 1/10 of a gram of deuterium-tritium fuel to provide that energy, demonstrating how immensely powerful fusion energy is. The final stage of the energy conversion process is the liquid metal capacitance cells, which take up nearly the entirety of the station's lower boom, extending below the station's habitation ring by several hundred meters. Liquid metal capacitance cells, or LMCCs, are an advanced energy storage and conversion technology that leverage the unique properties of liquid metals to enhance charge storage, conductivity, and electrical density. Liquid metal capacitance cells operate based on electrostatic energy storage, similar to traditional capacitors, but incorporate liquid metal electrodes, believed to be Indian gallium tin alloys, which are highly stable and non-toxic, to improve charge storage, thermal management, and durability. When a voltage is applied, positive and negative charges accumulate at the interface between the liquid metal electrodes and the dielectric medium. The use of liquid metals enables higher charge density due to the superior electron mobility. When the LMCCs is connected to a load, stored energy rapidly discharges, allowing for high power bursts, and the self-healing nature of liquid metal electrodes prevents dielectric breakdown, improving lifespan. Since the max firing cycle takes up to 15 seconds a shot, the reactor can generate energy constantly through this power cycle, charging the capacitance cells to their peak charge. Since the LMCC is capable of extremely fast charging and almost instantaneous discharge, this allows a constant energy flow from the reactor to effectively be converted into a rapidly cycling pulsed phase energy discharge. It also means that hypothetically the system can be fired early, reducing the muzzle velocity and thus kinetic energy of the impact proportionally, but allowing the system to cycle faster. This process can be expertly controlled by an artificial intelligence that can make near instantaneous calculations and corrections to the firing sequence, not only targeting each round fired more precisely than a human could manage, but tailoring the impact forces based on the intended target and the desired outcome, be it to simply breach energy shielding, to impact and stop within the target, or to overpenetrate and go on to strike other targets behind it. The Habitation Ring is a series of modular components that are mounted via the inertial dampening soft mounting reciprocating mechanism between the station's main gun and the Habitation Ring itself. The Habitation Ring, as the name implies, is the major portion of the station that is designed for human habitation and is divided into 4 major quadrants, named habitats, with their own unique phonetic designation, being habitats Alpha, Beta, Gamma, and Delta. This designation aids in personnel deployment across the station, particularly if the station falls under attack, but would also feasibly serve a useful purpose during the day-to-day operation of the platform, particularly for logistical purposes. First and foremost, the station is a military asset and a space station, meaning every aspect of the station's habitable areas are designed with military operations and the safety of its occupants in mind. This means that nearly every single room can be sealed off from others via vacuum-proof blast doors. Weapons racks and ammunition can be found in nearly every room in the station. Wall panels are armoured to protect sensitive equipment beneath. The windows are extremely thick and hardened to gunfire, plasma fire, micrometeorites and debris, and coated in a gold tint to reflect away intense heat and harmful infrared radiation. They may even employ a passive or active electrostatic system to aid in radiation proofing. It is currently unknown if the windows themselves have blast doors to seal a breach should one happen, or if the entire compromised room is simply sealed down until repairs can be performed, effectively dooming anyone within that room to asphyxiation and exposure to vacuum. Although, it also stands to reason that there may be emergency systems in place that would deploy emergency breathing apparatus at the very least, to keep anyone caught in compromised areas alive while recovery teams mobilise and retrieve them. In the event of an explosive decompression, however, any occupants would likely perish more or less immediately, so just sealing the compromised section would likely suffice. The Habitation Ring, and indeed the habitable areas around it and within the core of the station, have their own artificially generated gravity via grav plates beneath the deck plates. These were considered old technology by the turn of the 26th century and are able to effortlessly convert electrical energy into a gravity field, with the plates able to increase or decrease the strength of the gravity field simply by increasing or decreasing the electrical current. This immense innovation is mediated by xenostium, a superconducting plasma. It is because of this that we can infer that humanity must have discovered the elusive quantum force-carrying particle, the graviton, at some point between the 21st and 26th century, and following its discovery and innovation of technologies around it, humanity learned to generate graviton fields as simply as light bulbs generate photons. The existence of one standard G of gravity throughout the station means the crew can operate on the station as if they were on Earth, meaning no acclimation or specialist training is required. The entire habitation ring appears to be mirrored along the same axis as the bridge or command center. This symmetry makes it easier to ascertain functional aspects of the habitation ring, its layout and subtle differences. Due to this symmetry, and for strategic, tactical and emergency purposes, various mirrored modules are designated and differentiated by colour and number into specific zones. The only zones we've directly seen are red and blue zones, with respective number suffixes, but given the UNSC's prevalence for using red, blue, green and yellow as identifying colour schemes, it is assumed green and yellow zones exist as well. All of these will be addressed as we progress through the habitation ring. An integral aspect of the habitation ring is its transportation methods. The large distances between operational areas of the station require tram rails that ferry personnel, visitors, goods and supplies across the station to where it is needed. There are 4 tram rails that pass through their respective commons modules, with a few stations along the way. The tram stations are named after the commons they adjoin. On the port side, for example, is tram station R01, and on the starboard is likely tram station R02. The difference in the numbering being the mirroring of the station and thus the need for a number designation to differentiate them. On the port side, the wall panels are painted in a red colour to match the adjoining commons, so tram station R01 likely stands for Red 1. This tram line traverses commons R01 and adjoining commons where a station is located, and then onto commons B01 where it terminates in tram station B01, assumed to mean blue 1 in a tram station immediately before dry dock and shipping. Continuing on the port side, beyond shipping, another tram line runs from shipping across another set of commons within the Battle Cluster Specialization module. That would stand to reason would be called commons G01 and Y01, colour-coded green and yellow respectively. On the starboard side, this same layout would be mirrored, but designated a numerical integer higher, being R02, B02, G02 and Y02 for each respective colour and number coded commons. We never explicitly see this, but given the UNSC's convention for colour and number coding, it stands to reason this would be the official designations. The habitation ring also makes use of several personnel elevators that ferry personnel between levels, particularly in adjoining commons and the core of the station, as well as heavy goods elevators, with 2 of the largest in use in port and starboard shipping. Starting at the centerline axis and mirroring as we go, the bridge is the command center of the station. This is where the commanding officer resides while in command of the station, and where the bridge officers control the station's vital functions such as main weapon operation, point defense, communications, monitoring of the station's systems, coordinating forces on board to repel boarders, and strategic and tactical coordination with other orbital defense platforms, and, in the case of the Cairo, fleet-wide strategy and command. Various screens and scanners are used to monitor the station's functions and surroundings, all manned by naval or air force officers. The forward of the bridge is dominated by an immense command console with a huge tactical display on a raised platform. The bridge of the orbital defense platform dwarfs all other command decks within the UNSC. Its vaulted 12-meter high ceiling and all 4 walls of the bridge being covered by large windows allowing an unobstructed view of space. Either side of the room has a walkway that overlooks the command consoles in the centre of the room. There are 2 entrances to the bridge that enter at the port and starboard sides of the room, and these lead beneath the raised platforms on each side of the room and emerge on the lower deck of the bridge immediately ahead of the command consoles and immediately behind the raised command post station. From here, a person can walk up to the command post, and from here to the left or right to a staircase that leads to the overlooking balcony walkways, which eventually rejoin at the back of the room, or can move up either side of the tiered walkways either side of the command consoles. The doors are guarded by armed sentry guards and sealed during normal operations of the station. Immediately outside the bridge on both the port and starboard sides is a liminal space that gives access to tram stations that lead through the port and starboard hangar and habitat modules, doorways into the port and starboard crew quarters, an access corridor between the port and starboard sides of the habitation ring, and access to the port and starboard recreation areas. The tram platform itself features several public terminals to make calls and communicate with friends and loved ones, which suggests the station has a heavy emphasis on allowing the military personnel stationed on the ODP the ability to keep in touch with loved ones, suggesting time served on the station could be from weeks to several months, or that the station itself experiences some degree of public activity, but I don't think that's particularly likely. This area also has several automated collapsible weapon racks on the wall that can contain an assortment of small arms for use by the station's crew for anti-boarding action to repel boarders. And I will also briefly note that there is a biohazard sticker on a beam that contains piping, and as far as I've seen, it's the only place in the entire station that these biohazard stickers are, and the only thing I can chalk this up to is waste pipes from the station showers, mess and bathrooms. Given the crew quarters are nearby, it just makes sense. Just a little detail which speaks to the immense consideration of the design of the station. The main communications hub of the station can be found in the same structure as the bridge, but directly below and behind it. The room can be accessed via a corridor which joins the port and starboard sides of the habitation ring. The communications room contains various systems for communications across the station. The battle cluster, fleet-wide communications, interplanetary communication, communications with planet-side comms, all colloquially known as the UNSC Distributed Battle Management and Communications Network, abbreviated to BattleNet or BNet. The station utilises various satellite dish and hardened communication arrays within the room, as well as positioned across the hull surface of the station, all handling hundreds of different frequencies and thousands of different unique lines of communication. This room, its computational and processing systems, and the wider comms array are the eyes and ears of the station. On the port and starboard sides of the habitation ring, directly abutting the bridge, are the crew quarters. On the port side are the crew quarters for the Marines, including a barracks, mess hall, communal showers and bathroom on the lower deck, and a separate officers' barracks, officers' mess, wardroom, showers and bathrooms for the commissioned officers of the Marine Corps on the upper deck, with Recreation R01 attached directly to the crew quarters. On the starboard side are the crew quarters for the Navy, including a shared barracks, mess hall, showers and bathroom for enlisted ranks on the lower deck, and a separate officers' barracks, officers' mess, wardroom, showers and bathrooms for the commissioned naval officers on the upper deck, with Recreation R02 immediately attached to these quarters. The captain's quarters can be found immediately aft of the bridge on the starboard side, and has its own private access to the bridge. It is designed as a spacious private office and living space where the captain spends their off-duty time, mirroring the captain's quarters, but on the port side, and notably smaller, are the designated quarters for the station's executive officer, or second in command. The recreation rooms immediately adjoin the crew quarters on the port and starboard sides of the station. The port side is designated as Recreation R01, maintaining the wall cladding indicative of the red zoning of this portion of the habitation ring. The rec room is a multi-tiered recreational space with a half-dozen terminals for communications, so the crew can contact and have video conversations with loved ones, browse the chatternet, waypoint and otherwise relax. The 6 floor-to-ceiling windows grant beautiful views out into space, with the colony it is stationed above visible below. Several vending machines can also be found, as well as a separate balcony area for officers. The same is likely true on the starboard side for Recreation R02, but instead of Marines using this recreation room, it's the Navy personnel, with again a separate balcony area for officers. Both of these recreation rooms have access to tram stations outside of the bridge, and access to hangar bays and commons via an abutting corridor. At the end of this corridor is a stairwell that leads to the respective security stations bordering the commons. Security stations serve as a critical point for managing access and security within the station. They allow for monitoring entries and exits, controlling who enters or leaves, and providing a point of contact for security personnel to respond to emergencies or security concerns. These will often be manned by armed guards and or military police. Security Station R01 borders Commons R01, again copying the red wall cladding and designation nomenclature, and likely acts as a security checkpoint for personnel moving from the port Habitation Ring to the bridge and command centre. Another security station, B01, borders Commons B01, again matching the blue wall cladding, and likely acts as a security checkpoint for personnel arriving via port shipping. It stands to reason, due to the layout of the station, that yet another security station lies beyond port shipping as you move into the Battle Cluster Specialization module, likely designated Security Station G01, matching the suspected green cladding of Commons G01. However, there is likely not a security station adjoining the Commons Y01, as the Habitation Ring terminates here. The security station layouts will of course be mirrored on the starboard side of the station, but with an increase in the integer designator, being security stations R02, B02 and G02 respectively. The Commons are a set of large spacious rooms designed for socialising and leisure. The rooms feature raised platforms with plants, foliage and trees planted likely for the enjoyment of the crew during their downtime. Although if the station does play host to public or official events from the UEG for example, these beautiful habitats would be sensational features for the guests to enjoy. The immense skylights and windows grant unobstructed views into space and beautiful views of the nearby planet. The Commons are usually arranged in the same order. The first Commons area is bordered by a security station at one end. The other end is divided via a bulkhead to another smaller Commons area that doubles as a tram station, and then divided again by another bulkhead to another Commons area that mirrors the first. This mirrored pattern is more obvious from outside via the skylight window pattern of 5 windows for the first Commons, a large bulkhead separating a set of 3 windows, separated again from another set of 5. The tram lines move through the Commons on an upper level away from where people can walk, which is unusual because there is plenty of space beneath the elevated tracks of the tram line for people to walk, sit and enjoy the views. But there appears to be no means of accessing this area. This could be a simple oversight. A texture for a door access way may have been missed, or it indeed is completely intended that these areas should be inaccessible. The Commons have various walkways and flights of stairs to gain access to the elevated platforms, as well as separate corridors that run the length of the Commons, with vending machines, trash receptacles and seating to enjoy the views out of the windows. The corridor stretches the length of the Commons and, via a blast door, continues beneath the tram station to the other Commons. It is worth noting at this point that there likely would be significantly more seating, tables and other lounge-like furniture available in the Commons under normal circumstances, but the only encounter we've had with these locations were when the Master Chief was aboard the Cairo station and there was an impending attack from Covenant forces. The Commons areas, corridors and rooms of the Cairo, for example, are notably absent of seating and other such items except where they are fixtures to other larger elements, but heavily stocked with crates containing weapons, ammunition and equipment for a protracted siege. Commons R01 is bordered by Security Station R01, and has an access way and blast door to the corridor that leads to Commons B01, and another access way that leads to a blast door to the deck of Hangar A01, or it can be followed through to Hangar A02 and beyond to Commons B01. This area also has a staircase that leads to the gantry in Hangar A01. The smaller Commons and tram station is accessible at the other end of this gantry. Once in the smaller Commons, the tram station can be easily accessed or the view can be enjoyed, likely with aforementioned removed seating. Continuing out the other door of the smaller Commons grants access to the gantry of Hangar A02, which, if followed, leads to Commons B01. Commons B01 is a mirror of R01, with the coinciding B01 tram station and security station. Beyond port shipping, within the Battle Cluster Specialization module, is another set of 2 identical Commons, but with no smaller intermediate tram station. The assumed designations of these Commons would be Commons G01 and Y01, with the associated colour schemes of green and yellow. This is again mirrored in the starboard side of the station, with a change to the numerical integers to Commons R02, B02, G02 and Y02, with their coinciding wall cladding colour coding. The hangar bays of the ODP are fairly cramped when compared to hangar bays on UNSC ships, perhaps with the exception of the Moncton-Class light frigate, meaning only smaller vessels are able to land in the hangars. For example, a Pelican has only 1 meter of clearance around the entire craft in any direction, except in the vertical axis where it has 1.5 in either direction. This means landing in the hangar bay is likely computer controlled due to how tight it is. Generally only Pelicans and broadswords are small enough to dock in these hangar bays. The hangar bay doors are immense glass-clad and reinforced right-angle doors that open out and upwards, granting enough space for the landing craft to edge into the hangar bay. These doors, when closed, seat against the deck and bulkheads on vacuum gaskets and then lock closed via locking mechanisms in the hull that slide across into receivers in the doors. The hangar itself has 2 slightly raised landing platforms for 2 vessels per hangar, separated in the middle by a gantry and walkway that provides access to the upper surface of the docked vessel, and also provides access to the commons and tram station. This gantry can be accessed via a stairwell in the adjoining corridors. The room has between 3 and 4 vacuum seal blast doors to the deck that grant access into the hangar bay from adjoining corridors, 2 sealed hatches to staircases that lead to storage beneath the hangars, and 2 doors via the gantry. In order for a ship to dock, the hangar bay door must be opened, as at this stage in humanity's technological sophistication, access to atmospheric encapsulating energy barriers were not available, so the entire hangar bay must be depressurized to grant access. This would mean all personnel who were not equipped with vacuum-rated suits had to vacate the hangar, or remain inside an already docked and sealed vessel, as the atmosphere in the hangar is pumped out into holding tanks. All doors to the hangar bay would be sealed while this takes place, and the adjoining corridors would allow personnel to wait nearby while the hangar bay's atmosphere is cycled out and back in. It also provides another line of defence in case enemy forces board the station via the hangar bays. All of these doors can be sealed, effectively stranding the assaulting party in the hangar bay, forcing them to have to break through the doors in order to progress through the station. The hangar bays primarily receive personnel, equipment, freight and ammunition for the Supermech via Pelican dropships and occasionally D-82 darters. The accessway in the deck lead down staircases to a storage warehouse beneath the hangar where much of these resources can be stored temporarily before being unloaded and or moved across the station. There is also suggestion that the lower platforms next to the landing pads are actually heavy goods hydraulic elevators, indicated by warning decals showing the locations of hydraulic reservoirs and step markers. These would be powerful enough to lower heavy crates and goods into the storage warehouses beneath the hangars. Hangar Bay A01 and B01 both have standard storage warehouses. However, hangars A02 and B02 have MAC storage located beneath them. It appears as though MAC rounds weighing hundreds of tons each would be lowered into the MAC storage via heavy goods elevators and then loaded onto a MAC storage belt. These belts run several hundred meters beneath the hangar bays and commons and then down what appear to be a support strut that doubles as a magazine and leads directly into the core of the station directly above the ceiling of MAC fire control, where the autoloader system retrieves a MAC round from the belts and loads it to be fired. The MAC rounds can be seen stretching the entire length of MAC storage, passing through shutters at both ends, with the hangar bay end entering into MAC storage where the heavy hydraulic lifts are and the other end entering beneath the deck plates of the Armory and then beyond to the struts outside. Based on their spacing being around 2 meters apart and the length of the MAC storage belts being approximately 340 meters apiece, and there being 2 of them means the station MAC storage has a capacity of at least 340 rounds, which it could entirely exhaust its supply of in 1 hour 25 minutes. Hangar Bay A01 and A02 are both on the port side and directly connect to each other via adjoining corridors. This is mirrored on the starboard side with Hangar Bays B01 and B02. There is also another hangar bay in the core of the station directly below MAC fire control called Hangar Bay C01, which is much larger than the hangars on the Habitation Ring and have 2 heavy goods crane arms mounted on trackways on the ceiling and 2 hydraulic heavy goods lifts that can drop containers down into an automated storage area below, which can then move containers into storage or to an automated belt system that can ferry them up the major support struts to port and starboard shipping. This may yet be another location Mac rounds are loaded into the station, perhaps suggesting that the Mac storage belts actually originate near this hangar, stretching up to the support struts of the station beneath the commons and hangars and fold back on themselves and back through the station to fire control, in which case there may in fact be at least double the Mac storage capacity I originally suggested. However, this is an assumption. There are another set of hangar bays in the Battle Cluster Specialization modules, which we'll look at shortly. The Armory is, as the name implies, a location where the troops stationed on the ODP can find weapons. The room's walls are lined with automated weapons lockers. There is no obvious lock or touchpad to enable authorised personnel to open the lockers, suggesting they are either activated via movement, meaning literally anyone or anything can arm themselves, including visitors, unauthorised personnel or members of the Covenant, highly unlikely in my opinion, or they function via IFF transponders, an identification friend or foe tag that is implanted in every service member upon enlistment. There are various weapon benches and terminals throughout the Armory allowing the weapons to be worked on, cleaned or upgraded. There are 4 doors into the Armory. At either end of the room, these lead to corridors that run adjacently to the commons and connect the 2 commons together. On the near walls, one leads directly into the commons and the other opens to a lift that gives access to the commons balcony and tram station above. Directly beneath the Armory, the Mac storage belts can be found, accessible via deck plate doors that lift clear. The storage belts can be found entering the area under the Armory and exiting the other side directly beneath the lift via shutter doors. Armory A01 adjoins Commons B01 and features an armour restraint and targeting test station at one end and an energy shield test station on the other. It is unknown if this is unique to Armory A01 or if this is common across all armories. It is assumed based on the mirrored layout of the station that there is also an armory on the starboard side of the Habitation Ring, likely designated A02. 2 of the more dominating structures of the Habitation Ring of the ODPs are the dry docks. Large, roughly U-shaped arms that extend from the Habitation Ring superstructure with enough room between the arms to allow the docking of all UNSC corvettes, frigates and destroyers, and likely a massive array of cargo, logistics and transport ships. Although the dry dock itself might not be able to fit cruisers between the arms, there is a suggestion that cruisers can in fact dock against the end of both arms, with the umbilicals bridging the gap. That being said, the outer surface of the arms have a standardised UNSC docking hardpoint connector, and assuming these docking hardpoints can extend between the ship and the station, could allow up to 4 ships the size of cruisers to be docked to the station simultaneously, in addition to the 2 between the arms, allowing a maximum of 6 UNSC starships to be docked to the station at any given time. Between the arms are a set of 8 space bridges that extend from the station itself and attach to docked ships via vacuum-sealed magnetic clamps. These allow personnel to move between the station and the ship itself. There are numerous container bays along the dry dock for freight that has either been offloaded from the ship or is due to be loaded onto it, again with evidence that they may double as heavy goods lifts and be able to drop the containers down into storage warehouses below, but again this is merely assumed due to the presence of hydraulic reservoirs and step decals. And aside from somehow moving the containers through the void into the freight doors into shipping, there appears to be no other way to get the contained resources into the station without just physically emptying them by hand and walking the contents inside. There are a set of 3 airlocks that grant access between the dry dock and shipping, 2 for personnel, likely logistics engineers to deal with the shipping containers or other similar duties that may apply to either the freight or the docked ship, and a third which is wider and larger that allow freight to be directly loaded between the shipping and the docked ship. While frigates and many other UNSC warships may not be compatible with this format, there are likely a lot of cargo transports which could dock and have their own cargo airlocks in direct alignment. In the event that the fusion reactor sustains damage, the entire system can be moved over to siphon energy through high-order manifolds from any docked vessels. There are 6 of these high-order manifolds, 3 on each side of the dry dock. These are labelled as docking umbilicals RSR 1015.10. These can be extended and coupled to coinciding energy conduits within the docked ship, allowing the ship's reactor to power the station. It's worth noting here that this means that it might be hypothetically possible to dock 2 ships to the ODP and utilise all 3 reactors from both ships and the station's own reactor to enable the system to charge and fire with even more energy. The weapon itself cannot cycle any faster than every 15 seconds, but overcharging the coils may be possible if considerably dangerous and risks melting the coils. If the energy available is directly commensurate to the excitation of the coils and thus the energy imparted onto the round, this may increase the muzzle velocity 3-fold. 5 km per second could easily rise to 15 km per second. Bearing in mind the 5 km per second muzzle velocity was a conservative estimation and may in fact be higher by default, or be able to be higher through more extended charging of the capacitance cells. In either case, at 15 km per second, this would be 5% the speed of light, faster than the supermax of the Moncton-Class Orbital Defense Platforms around Reach, meaning the 251 ferrite tungsten slugs of the Moncton could strike a target with the equivalent energy of 6.7 gigatons of TNT, or 28.2 exajoules of energy, or 135 SAR bombers, which is still a little under 10 times less powerful than the Moncton-Class, owing to its 3,000 ton projectile mass. Aside from the array of communications, antennas and dishes, the final noteworthy point is the evacuation stations. On either side of the arms of the dry dock are 4 life pod launch bays, totaling 16 across the entire station as far as we are aware. Each one contains a Class 3 enclosed heavy lifeboat controlled, otherwise known as the SKT-9 Bumblebee lifeboat shuttle, capable of seating 9 occupants including the pilot, meaning a total of 154 people can be evacuated via the Bumblebee escape pods, basically being the entire crew of naval personnel. As for the 136 Marines and any other workers that may be on the station, it is assumed they'd be able to evacuate via the docked Pelicans. Shipping is the primary area of the ODP responsible for receiving goods into the station. The room is impressively high, with a long slanted window following the path of a heavy goods lift looking out towards the core of the station and its immense main gun. To the left and right of the room are bays of storage vaults totaling 58 storage vaults for a grand total of 116 across both port and starboard shipping, and 4 access ways to the tram stations either side of shipping, being tram station B01 and G01 in the case of port shipping, and B02 and G02 in the case of starboard. Shipping has a goods airlock with 2 personnel airlocks within it for access to the dry docks and to docked freight vessels. A fixed container crane on a movement gantry is in situ high above the inner goods airlock, with the range to be able to lift containers brought through the airlock to areas either side or load them onto the heavy goods lift. The warning stripe marked area immediately ahead of the airlock is actually a container ramp, able to drop at one end, matching the gradient of the heavy goods lift, allowing shipping containers to be fed onto an automated ramp that would carry the containers down the support strut beneath the reciprocating recoil absorption mechanism and into the core of the station at approximately the same level as Hangar C01, suggesting containers carrying large shipments of MAC rounds could be ferried directly down to MAC storage near MAC fire control. The heavy goods lift itself is a 2-tiered lift that ferries freight and personnel on a 45-degree incline lift to one of 3 levels. The first being shipping itself, the second being an airlock to a walkway across the reciprocating recoil mechanism to the core of the station, and the third being beyond this, the lifts to MAC fire control and Hangar Bays C01, likely with other floors granting access to the station's reactor and service area for the capacitance cells, the lowest level being in the base of the support strut that likely leads directly to the same floor as MAC fire control and Hangar C01, granting direct access to these areas for resupply and storage. Port shipping and starboard shipping are likely direct mirrors of each other, granting direct access to their respective dry docks, support struts, tram lines, commons, and hangars. The final components of the Habitation Ring are the Battle Cluster Specialization modules. These modules are purpose-built and customised based on the needs of the battle cluster. A battle cluster refers to a coordinated group of military assets, typically in orbit or deep space, assigned a specific battlefield function. This concept applies to fleet combat, orbital defense networks, and planetary assault formations. The ODPs around Earth, for example, were grouped together into battle clusters that specialised in specific tasks and supported each other. In large-scale space warfare, battle clusters are specialised formations of defence stations and support elements designed to carry out specific tactical and strategic roles. These battle clusters are not random assortments of ships, but carefully structured units that specialise in different aspects of space combat. The Cairo, Athens and Malta ODPs were one such battle cluster. The battle cluster specialisation modules contain a tram line and 2 stations, 1 security station, a larger 2-bay hangar bay, 2 commons, and logistics and storage areas. The tram line would run from shipping to the far end of the module via stations G01 to Y01 on the port side and G02 to Y02 on the starboard. These would both pass through 2 colour-coded commons, commons G01 coloured green and commons Y01 coloured yellow on the port, and the mirror O2 on the starboard side. The only security station on the module rests at the connection point between shipping and the module itself. The lower decks have storage for ammunition and resources to serve the specific specialisation for that module. The larger hangar bay in the module was the major difference between this module and the rest of the station. The Cairo, for example, was configured to carry light fighter craft and utility craft in these hangars. The Malta carried longsword interceptors, and the Athens carried data cargo shuttles and maintenance drones. These craft would serve functional roles across not only the station they were berthed at, but all other stations in the battle cluster. So the darters of the Malta would carry cargo, freight and ammunition, and utilise the maintenance drones across all 3 stations, keeping them supplied. The Athens would provide longsword fighter coverage to the battle cluster, and the Cairo would lend its light fighter craft to the defence of the cluster. There is often linked battle networks between the battle clusters, as well as AI coordination. Aside from the station's complement of fighters, interceptors and troops on board, the station has a limited point defence system. The ODPs sport 7 M606 goalkeeper point defence guns with overlapping fields of fire. Not much is known about the specifics of these point defence guns, however there is a real-world counterpart called the Goalkeeper Close-In Weapon System, or CIWS, which is an automated radar-operated, fully automatic 7-barreled 30mm Gatling gun capable of firing 70 rounds per second. It is assumed that the station's point defence turrets are extremely reminiscent of this gun or others similar to it, such as the US-created Phalanx, and thus would be sufficient to bring any attack craft under a hail of projectiles too dense to avoid, and able to almost cut the craft in half. The orbital defense platforms have only a few variants beyond the one discussed in this video today, being the Moncton-Class. The next most notable version is the Arod class, a specific variant of ODP that has thus far only been seen in orbit around Reach, that apparently fires a 3,000-ton projectile at 4% the speed of light, meaning the round in question strikes with the equivalent energy of 51 gigatons of TNT, nearly 1,000 times more powerful than the Tsar bomber. The interesting thing is that the platform's actual accelerator is exactly the same mark and serial number as the one used in the Moncton class, so it is likely the storage capacity of the capacitance cells and or the energy available per round that makes the difference. Due to the larger round and higher muzzle velocity, the Arod class requires power beamed to it from ground-based nuclear fusion generators via microwave or laser-based energy transmission arrays. So, while the Arod class are so much more powerful than other supermax, it has a massive vulnerability, in that if the ground-based generators fall under attack and are destroyed or otherwise offlined, the defence platforms are rendered entirely moot. There is also an unclassified variant of orbital defense platform, which seemingly is either capable of aiming the barrel of the weapon independently from the rest of the station, or that the barrel itself is mounted laterally to the station. I wouldn't want to be on board that one when it fired. The Moncton-Class Orbital Defense Platform stands as a vital UNSC installation. purpose-built to protect essential planetary assets, particularly strategic colonies and military outposts. These platforms are indispensable for the UNSC's planetary defence, delivering powerful, long-range firepower and commanding strategic oversight. Alongside their sister classes, Moncton-Class Orbital Weapons Platforms played a pivotal role in defending human colonies throughout the Human Covenant War. Numerous platforms were strategically deployed around Canberra during the planet's invasion in 2542 and continued to serve valiantly into the war's concluding weeks, contributing significantly to the defence of Reach, even as they were gradually offlined by their reactors being taken over by Covenant forces. On October 25, 52, Moncton-Class Orbital Weapons Platforms comprised the entire 300 installations that formed Earth's orbital defence grid. This robust network was a cornerstone of the UNSC's ambitious strategy, seamlessly integrating ground-based aerospace fighters, low-orbit satellites and warship squadrons into a formidable multi-layered defence system. During the battle for Earth as the Prophet of Regret's fleet of Sacred Consecration breached Earth's defences, the Moncton-class platform engaged the Covenant fleet effectively from a distance. Cairo served as Lord Hood's command centre, expertly coordinating the defence of Earth and inflicting devastating damage on enemy forces, even as the Covenant managed to board and destroy the Athens and Malta stations and slip a single CAS-class assault carrier through the defences to deploy forces throughout Mombasa. The Moncton platforms remained steadfast in their defence of Earth, even as the Covenant fleets encroached upon the Sol system. When the overwhelming armada, led by the Prophet of Truth, arrived in November, the situation intensified. Although the defences were strong, the final invading fleet overran much of the orbital defence grid and the home fleet, successfully disabling or destroying many of the remaining platforms after prior engagements had already diminished their strength. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, kindly tap that like button, and if you're not already subscribed and want to see more stuff like this, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future uploads. Pop a comment down below telling me what you thought of today's video, or if you want me to cover something specific in the near future. I want to take this opportunity to thank and give shoutouts to my patrons and YouTube supporters: Spartan10148, my singular Contender class Ancilla, the triumvirate of minds within my installations Metarch, Falcon, Jordan and Poseidon, my 7 installation monitors Selphia, Ashley, Esoteric, Spartan1029, Chris, Orion and Shane, the crush of sub-monitors Legion, Ryan, Lebrat, Spartan0137, Element 0, J3, Cult, Evermore's, Personal Devil, Scion Esports, Phantasma, Ashton and 191 Shaken Lightbulb, my fleet of Strato Sentinels, my most loyal of Enforcers, and every single one of the awesome people supporting the channel over on Patreon. My Tier 0 Transcendent YouTube members Spartan137, again, Maury, Jimbo and Balaz, and all other YouTube members keeping my installation functional on that glorious vacuum energy. I cannot thank you all enough. Shout out to John because... And if you like what I'm doing here, consider supporting the channel on one of the support links in the description to net yourself some tasty merch and help keep the channel going. Take it easy everyone, and find peace in the domain.